or writing content. So I came across another podcaster that is in UK called Daniel Geffen. So Daniel shared a very interesting story of his platform Podbookers, which is like he was saying that you don't really advertise to people when you do podcasting. And you can actually build a relationship with your audience for like 40 minutes. It says there's no such digital platforms gives you this kind of reach and avenues and capacity to connect with your audience, which is that's why I'm in podcasting eventually.
That's very interesting. So I know you're brand new into podcasting, which is why I was interested in talking to you. Um,
Yeah.
I've talked to people that are at different levels with their podcasting, and that balance that you get from talking to someone that's seasoned as well as someone that's just figuring out everything that needs to be done to get started is what I was trying to achieve. And so tell me what your process has been like so far.
So that is a very good point. Like, how do I get into podcasting and then subsequently moving forward, right? So I guess that's where the question comes in
Okay.
from what is so I guess like the first obstacle is the mindset that I have. So I used to like wondering, my voice sounds very weird when I first time heard it, and then the yeah, that's a true story. So it's like I get somebody like Daniel was saying that you shouldn't be bothered about your voice. Just tell what's the value that you have for your audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like saying how would you relate how your target audience can be understand better with listening to what you're going to say. So I think that's the first obstacle that you should think about is how you sound yourself. Like what kind of things do you carry on as a person on audio. So that's how I first started. And I think the second point that I want to bring in, once you go through that personal issues, is the technology part of it. So I think most of the people who are not tech savvy, they'll be wondering like, oh, what tools should I use to start recording? What tools should I use to even host my podcast? And then like, they will be worried about how to edit their voice and sound because you have a lot of winds around your podcast, for example. So that's like chasing a squirrel when you try to figure out like everything from scratch. So that's where the pet actually guided through like some of the process flow in one of the income stream episodes where he walked through from how he start from the scratch of recording the voice and all the way to editing, and then subsequently telling me that I should upload it into podcasts to distribute it via Google Podcasts, Apple, and Spotify. So
Mhm.
I'm using a channel like Podbookers. So Podbookers is actually like a platform where the host and guests are in that presence, so you can reach out to them and say, "Hey, I want to pitch in to speak on your columns." So I think just to bring out a perspective of someone who may not be heard of podcasting the first time, try to be on the guest show with a good idea, just to get you familiarized like how you're comfortable talking online. That's to break the barrier.
Okay. Now,
Yeah,
I know you're a blogger though, and you do have a successful blog.
right.
Are your topics for your podcasting going to be similar to what's seen on your blog?
That is a very wide diversity. There's a different diversity right now.
Okay.
So the ones that currently that you're seeing on the blog is more like a perspective of marketers' point of view and how do I build an entrepreneurship kind of capacity. So what the podcast that I launched in, just to give perspective to the audience, is more like how to do a digital business model. And it's more like to reach out, like what do I learn from talking to other people online, like in the conference, because I put in my podcast in the link for collusion just last week. And like 100 of these people that is like from students all the way from the entrepreneurs tech, and some of them are investors, so they actually like give different feedback like, oh, I think that you can do a more personalized style of a discussion. So like I was covering in my blog today is how David Beckham, one of the famous footballers, shared his view of vaccinations and how he treats mental health. So that's not something on my blog, but it's something that I will be sharing like from a podcast point of view.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
What platform do you use? What did you use to get started?
For the podcast, it's like I'm using a few of them. So
Okay.
right now for the hosting, I'm using a Bcast, which is one of the similar like Squadcast if I understand it. So it works the same. And then there's also like some blog articles to change to podcasting, which is like TAYL. So that's the abbreviation names that's given. So what does TAYL do is like they convert the blog article text into some voice of the podcast. So you can check just like some languages, like if I have a Jarvis, so how does Jarvis speaks this article? Yeah, so that's one that I will be using. And then I use actually like even the names, how do I name the podcast title? So I use like even a headline analyzer. So I'm using kind of like content marketing
Okay.
skills to bed in for my podcast.
Oh, that makes sense. So what is the
Yeah.
name of your podcast?
Sorry?
What is the name of your podcast?
The Tao of Digital Business, Online Business.
Digital business. Okay, that's cool. And
Yeah, so I think Tao of Online Business. Sorry.
and your blog. What's the name of your blog?
My column right now is Marc in Asia, so I think that's the one that I will be using as a focal channel. And then they will link it up from my website, which is my name, Elton Kuah Consulting, and then the podcast is actually the Tao of Online Business.
Tao. Okay. What does Tao
Yeah.
mean?
Well, if you know China, you've been there. Tao is basically like the balance between the essence of like what is online business. So Tao is actually the representation of the fundamentals. But the way I bring it to the perspective is if you read the description. So I was referring to Richard Branson's quote of like opportunities comes in buses. So in order to catch the right bus, you need to have the strong Tao. And that's how I get to mirror it from a lady called Sheena who talks about self-confidence. But in my case, I'm using it to talk about embedding into a different online digital business.
Oh, that's really cool. That's unique.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did you launch your podcast? Did you do a soft or a hard launch?
Yeah, that is a very like I launched the podcast actually during Collision this week. So I talked to about 200 people at one go, like just put the links and like they just come and give feedbacks and like some of them are subscribing it. So they know that it's my episode that I first lay out my story, how I started my business. So I purposely took a podcast which I recorded like 10 years ago, which is not named as podcast at that point. But it's just a normal recording. And they actually saying that that's kind of a long journey, like how he started business. They thought that I was a newbie in this space.
Okay.
Yeah. So that I'm moving forward. I think like talking with the pros was one of the next steps coming in. Like that's how I think we both of us can connect as well. We can subsequently work on that collaboratively. And then I think Pop Brokers will be the third channel where I will be doing on other platforms. Yes, to bring in like influencers featured on their channels and say that, hey, can I be part of your sharing to share some of my knowledge to help the audience kind of. So that's the theme that I'm bringing as well.
Wow. So which day did you launch?
That was on Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Well, yeah, Wednesday morning Canadian time.
Really? Have you gotten any subscriptions, any downloads?
I think it's already like about 50, 100, I think from the stats just now that I take a look. And that's just only from the conference itself.
50, 100? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Now that's amazing. You're going, okay, so, and your strategy for getting this 50, 100 downloads was from sending it out to this 200 people to review it? Was that?
Yeah, right now there is one like I'm writing to 200 and then some, they are actually like content writers. So I'm like they're redistributing some contents to their followers. Wow. Yeah, so I guess like that's things that I still need to track, but hopefully that will grow better. So I think now like if I was being told, especially with Jay who is in SPI Pro, some podcasts will take a long time to grow it. So that's something that I need to be persistent, like keeping like 10 episodes consistently, or how do I plan a different value around it? Because podcast monetization is something that I was hoping to aim for, but I understand that it's not the easiest thing to do right now, especially with platforms like Clubhouse comes in the picture.
Okay, so yeah. Let's see. What was your process for starting the podcast? What 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 steps did you go through?
Well, I actually do a lot of scriptings right now before I actually record a podcast. So for instance, like I will think about what topics that I have to bring in for the week, and then the audience category, like what kind of values of 3 point values that I give in. So I think of value one as like a appetizer. So this week I'll be talking just a sneak preview, like David Beckham is probably someone that you know in the world of soccer, but you didn't know like how he treats his children on mental health, and that's why you should be looking at the show. So if you like to watch it, please stick it to the end, because there's something that probably will be interest for those who have mental health issues. Yeah, so I'll do a lot of sneak previews as a start, and then I think the most important point in the marketing context, like if you keep enjoying the podcast, would you be likely to share to someone who you think have a similar issues? So what Pat actually was sharing as well in the income stream, like how would you think of not selling exactly, but how do you serve the audience? And that's something that actually is a very interesting thought in terms of just recording the podcast itself. So the next step when you have this thought in mind, so I'll be using tools like Audacity, which is a free tool. So you can start recording the podcast as well. If you think that even in Zoom or Riverside, so I think that will be something that where you need to take note of your audio quality and how you're actually going to chop and filter. So I have another ways to use tool like Remaster to clean up those audio noises and amplify the music effects. And
Okay.
then subsequently I upload into the Bcast FM hosting, and from there they will distribute it to the podcast distribution channels. So that's the overall process that I'm using.
Okay. Are you hosting through Buzzsprout?
That's the competitor of Buzzsprout. So I do use Buzzsprout,
Oh,
but Bcast gave me a lifetime deal offer, which I took it.
okay. So Bcast is what you're hosting through.
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting. So,
Yeah.
so tell me what's something that has surprised you through this process, something that you didn't expect to run into?
Well, this is something that I found across in the collusion. So some Canadian young guys stick it to my face and says that you don't sound like us like natively, but you do kind of like talk our language, like the terms that relates to them in their daily life. So he said that makes sense when I look at it, but you don't sound like a typical Canadian. So I was like, yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of feedback from the audience. So right now, what I'm doing actually a lot is getting the audience like to know what they want. Actually takes more than just like for them listening to podcasts. So I just ask them secrets in between, like in the between of episodes. So which point do you exactly catch of what I said exactly that relates to you? So that interpretation of the context of my life story differs from people who gives the feedback. That's the surprising part.
Okay. Now tell me, quite similar. Tell me what challenges you ran into in setting up your podcast and how you overcame them.
Uh yeah, so the point of the process flow to take it understanding is a while. So I told you the courage to actually even starting it.
Mhm,
Like even when I talk to Americans, especially when they hear some accent that's different from what they usually hear,
mhm.
yeah, it's kind of hard to overcome that perception. Like how does the overseas audience understands my language? So that's already an initial challenge. And I think when I come across it, the second challenge would be like, how do I make sure the right people actually will be listening to my podcast? Because I can do like the 10 episodes of podcast, and some of my friends so far that says there's no downloads of it. It's very depressing when nobody actually listens to you. But so I think the challenge is how do we support podcasters economy? That is the term that I hear this round. Like in collusion, they actually are ladies sharing a lot of stay at home economy. How do you think podcasting will be giving a value from your own voice? And if you are comparing yourself and versus a brand, how would you be standing out? So all these things will be a lot of I would say chasing the squirrel kind of a situation.
Okay.
Like if you're trying to figure out the process by yourself, it's actually very overwhelming. So I
Mhm.
think in the pros, actually, they share a lot of practice, like, oh, I did this step, and I think that you can do a lot better at this using Loom or some sort of article to supplement your points. That will be helpful. Yeah, so I think there's some support system that you probably need to overcome in between, like getting the ideas across when I talk and how do I sound it actually when you plays out. Because the way how the audio technology comes in the editing, nobody likes this one. So probably they need to think either I need to spend time hours to do the editing myself, or I also sit to an agency or experts who can do this better. So that's time versus the returns.
Yeah, but the value that you provide is it's something that people are going to have to jump all that hurdle to receive.
Yeah.
You already have a platform. You already have a successful platform to work from. So, are you finding that your audience, the audience that you had as a blogger or as a writer, are
Okay.
are following you to your podcast? Are you finding that?
That is actually like current ones what I'm seeing is actually probably the ones that know me for quite a while. So that's why I think it's picking up. But from now I'm tracking is from the conferences. So conferences is where people to connect me like first time starters, and then like they want to know more about my stuff and what do I share. So I just give them like upcoming episodes of
Oh, that's
different types of digital models that are running through. So if you come across my podcast in coming weeks, you see that there's a variety of like what do I learn in Alibaba, for example, and the business school, and how do I apply to small businesses. So that's something that you hear from personal perspective. You don't get this from Google. So I try to like finding the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
strategy. Now tell me, so what is your um, promotion strategy? How do you plan to promote your podcast?
That is actually like Podbrokers is already what I mentioned. It's a marketplace for that. There's actually kind of channels where you can look at it. So I'll just type in the chat for you to look at later on. And then when I write an article, so I'm posting in Marketing in Asia, obviously it's one of the platforms where the marketers actually read it. So that's my podcast link is going to be embedded
Okay.
somewhere in the article bottom. And I think I'll be doing quite a lot of like communities that I know of. So I think like you can write ICO and articles, but in terms of building relationship, it's a lot easier for people to download my podcast, which I found right now. It's through the people who I know and they like to refer this content to their friends. So for them, it's like, as long as the content is free and valuable, they're actually going to download it. So don't think about monetization. So that's what I think Jay actually shared Pro.
Yeah, I think so too. So
Yeah.
that's quite interesting so far. What's been your experience so far? Is it are you enjoying this? Are you finding it um, like you said, it took you a long time to get into podcasting. So getting into it now, are you still fired up? Do you have any regrets or are
Well,
you?
I think so far I didn't come across like bad reviews yet, so I don't think it's that depressing. It's just give a refreshing space, like in terms of when I speak and versus what I write. It's a lot easier for me to speak up like now. That's something that I'm quite happy that my voice sounds like a lot pleasant a bit.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think the challenge that probably I will be thinking moving forward, it's actually like how to make it something that is valuable, sustainable in a period where if I run to 20 episodes, so what's the conclusion I'll be seeing of 20 episodes? What's the direction? So that direction probably something that I need to go to a workshop like power podcastings and etc. Because Pat was saying that there's a lot of things that you need to understand in the industry. Like once people start to jump into podcasting, which is heating up right now in America, like how will we standing out among all those sea of noises? Remember when I use an example like Clubhouse?
Mhm.
Initially, it was building a lot of attractions. Like everybody wants to speak on Clubhouse, and it's very exclusive. But now I notice that my friends probably will stick less than 2 minutes on the platforms, and then they keep jumping from different rooms for another. So I
Yeah.
think if you're dealing with the attention span challenge, you probably need to find something that hooks them up to listen to you.
So are you on Clubhouse?
Well, I did record like one sessions because I don't have a Apple device. I was actually borrowing somebody's device on it
Mm-hmm.
just to see how it works, and that's how I come out the conclusion. Like people keep jumping in after a while because they have a celebrity. In Malaysia, we have funny trend. The room suddenly pop up a lot of people in when
Okay.
a known celebrity comes in for like speaking for 20 minutes, and then after that the attendees were just like leaving the room quietly.
Jump out.
Yeah, they have like a hopping kind of a sequence.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So what I think is actually like, if I was to record some episodes, I have to think about something like freebies or probably like some opt-ins. It should lead up to some lead generation because that's something that you probably need to nurture the relationship, so that I have to take it as medium-term investments.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So,
Yeah.
do you plan to? I know this is kind of like something most people start thinking about maybe after a whole year of podcasting or so many episodes. But in my opinion, whenever you start any business model, you should know where you want it to go. So I'm going to ask this anyways. Do you plan to monetize? And if so, how do you plan to do so?
That actually is some part of like monetization comes in form of collaboration. So the way I see is I'm not doing podcast advertising like I'm gonna put it into some channels like Pantheon and all that. So based on what I also talked to some influencers in the space. So I think there'll be a cross promotion, like how do we promote each other's contacts and like based on relationships. So if I bring in say Christine in future to my channels, so will you be able to like sell a course or ebook or some sort of workshops that probably people can relate,
Mm,
and they will be signing up from there. So that will be one strategy of it. The other ones which I think is if I'm working with some big brands. So let's say if I'm approaching somebody like Pat, so how would I be able to add value to Pat's audience and then like to build a big subscriber? So a bigger brands will be like, I want to build a SEMrush article to writing. Would my be writers interested to get a special deal that I don't offer, that they offer normally, but they offer exclusive to somebody like myself?
no.
So that model actually is something that I come across on Collision. They mentioned that it's actually very good when you have a startup that has a very interesting product, but not much of the actual users. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a win-win situation for both parties, like
Yeah.
creator versus the ones on the brand owner. So let's say you have a mom, your mom has a good stories like Dr. Jagger, and it says that I got a chiropractor company who wants to work with you. So
Mm-hmm.
branding will be helpful like in terms of relationship nurturing, and you can bring a long-term relationship business. So I'm actually looking at that direction, not like I'm putting on Google ads, how to monetize. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me how you've been able to. Okay, first of all, let me ask how often do you plan to release your episodes on a week? Is that on a weekly basis?
That is, I think, will be bi-weekly when I look at editing and all that. So if I think there's a mixture of like when my voice comes in, it'll be like maybe twice a month. But if I put in my AI tools comes in, so if like I'm using a different voice from a machine just to convert my blog articles, that probably can be a weekly kind of details. So what I'm monitoring is if the subscriber doesn't stick in this period, like they just jump off after a certain episode. So I will be taking note of that. But right now, I think to build a presence, I need to do often like weekly basis.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
Yeah,
now that I know that, I can ask this question. So, uh,
yeah,
what I noticed in podcasting, not just from talking to you, but from talking to like a whole bunch of different people, is that there's so many different pieces that you have to attend to be able to come out with one episode.
yeah,
Now, I know that you're already a busy entrepreneur and you're also a blogger.
yeah.
So now you're adding podcasting to the plate. How do you plan to tie all these pieces together?
I that is a very good perspective of question. So it's actually a kind of hard to like figure out an ideal flow, just to be honest with it, because I'm working on myself and there's a VA that I need to train up to manage some of the routine steps. So eventually, like in terms of like naming the podcast and researching part, the idea has to come from me as an owner. But if I want to translate into a routine like AI content, like just to do a simple kind of voicing and how to script it properly, that eventually the VA can take over. So I think eventually there's someone that I'm getting in will take over the routine task for a creative idea is me. So the question is now, if I'm a solopreneur mom, you probably need to take a longer time to plan the episodes and do the necessary work for yourself. I'll give myself 3 weeks for that, just to get the ropes right. So that's a concern, like, because when people wants to get a lot of traction comes in, you need to do a lot of episodes, but not many people are comfortable to posting on weekly basis when you don't have enough resource time. So I think like if I last week, which I can tell you that I've been working from morning, noon, almost 11. So my off days on that week, last week was 3 a.m. up to 6 a.m.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, I was telling you that's a crazy week. So I like sleeping in between in the pillow under my work desk. Well, that week I can't record any episodes for sure. Yeah, so but just to give an answer, I think when Pat was sharing now, so I was mastermind with some of the pros individually, like how do you manage your time? Like, do you block 4 episodes in that 1 week itself when I'm not so packed? And then like for the editing, can you outsource some help to manage your technical? So if I get some Fiverr for $5, maybe he can edit some part of episodes which is important. So I can roll that out first. Yeah.
So how often do you put out blog posts?
I do it every monthly. So
Okay.
that's easy. Yeah.
Okay. How old?
So I think.
Now?
Sorry.
How old is your blog?
Well, I started it on I think it's before the pandemic, maybe 2019.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is quite a bit.
Okay. It definitely has been a while. Okay, so I've gathered so much information from you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Christine. Hope it helps
I
you on that.
would love to follow up to see how your whole podcast experience goes, because right now you're at the very beginning, which was why it was important to me to talk to you now. And I'd like to talk to you probably in 6 months in, because
I think it's like probably 3 months. Hopefully it's good enough. Yeah.
3 months in, okay.